Hello.
All right, here we go. Welcome to Confidence Conversations with Idara. And today I have with me the lovely Diana Aldrete. I'll tell you a bit about Diana, and then Diana, right after I'm done with that, I'll hand over to you so you can fill in any blanks. It was lovely reviewing your background. So we started with what I knew first, that you are the founder of Empowered Purpose, which can be found on empoweredpurpose.org. Your background touched a breadth of things, and there was a background in education, and that's both with high school as well as adult education. And there's definitely something to be said for understanding how people learn at different ages and being exposed to different people. You had a background in hospitality, including sort of back end, looking at that revenue component, which has an international component to it too. You've not only worked in the United States, you've worked in Mexico as well. And then just seeing how you touched on education in a number of different settings, as well as in the professional setting, because you've been an instructor, a career counselor on the school side, a trainer, staff development specialist, professional development strategist, and trainer, training and development manager, just the training, touching people, educating people across academics as well as hospitality, sort of neatly ties and leads into you now running your own business, empoweredpurpose.org, where it's summarized here as neuro-emotional improvement provider using low-energy neurofeedback systems and professional development trainings. So you've prepped all your life to do this work, but I'll also let you summarize what it is that you're doing now.
Wow.
Yes, wow. I'm telling you, I was very loud.
Well, you took me back, actually. It's like, yes, and you summed it up absolutely beautifully when you said everything led up to what I'm doing now. And it's so difficult to see that in the moment as you're building, you may be struggling, all these little things, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, when somebody kind of puts it into a picture, you're like, ah. So it led me to what I'm doing now. Yes. So essentially I'm a brain trainer. And what that means is through two ways, through neurofeedback and personal and professional development, we help optimize your brain. So it's a twofold. The first thing we have to do is figure out physiologically what's happening with your brain. And that is the neurofeedback part. So there's two types of neurofeedback. There's the traditional neurofeedback. There's a direct neurofeedback. I do the direct. It's the lens system. And essentially what that is we put the electrodes on your head and we just let your brain, you just sit, relax, you don't do much, and your brain sends signals to our machine, and the machine serves kind of like a mirror, sends it right back, and your brain gets an opportunity to go, oh, that's not the best way to do this. And then it self-regulates to optimal levels. So it's used for things like everything from anxiety to PTSD, concussions. Right now I'm working with some stroke recovery, even sports performance. So the brain actually doesn't know the difference between something physical or emotional trauma, in the sense that it's going to work the same way. It's going to try to attack it the same way or protect itself in the same way. And so these brainwave patterns get stuck, and the neurofeedback is a way to unstick that. So you're struggling with anxiety at work, overwhelm, a little bit of anger management, whatever it is, or just not able to focus. You come in, we get your brain functioning at an optimal level, and then we start figuring out, okay, let's not send you back to that same situation. What were those skills that maybe we were missing? Was it an environmental issue and now we're good to go? Is it just professional habits that you've gained over the years that put you in the same position over and over? So then we talk about all those things. We discuss, that's the professional development piece, right? So the time management, the traditional time management, stress management, how to deal with difficult people, having difficult conversations with your bosses, managing up, managing down, that type of thing. That's kind of in a nutshell what we do.
Okay, so now having had one of those elements of technical difficulties can happen, moving on, we'll just pick up the conversation, but I've enjoyed our conversation already. And every conversation that we've had so far, I've learned a little bit. But this one, in preparing to go over introduction, has just shed a light on what we touched a little bit on, that essentially all of what you had been doing prepared you for being a business owner in this particular way, having
Right.
a breadth of professional experience to be able to interact with different people, guide people through a number of different scenarios, and then also layer on the neurofeedback
Mhm.
element of it as well. I was also talking about not too long ago how we often tell people now, it's so obvious to people, you don't have to stay in any one place for too long. You
Mhm.
can move on and continue to build your career that way. One of the things I noticed, and part of why you have the breadth of experience, is that you did go into different places, different organizations for different aspects of your career, including being the
Yeah.
chief executive officer, which, as I was talking about being in organization development, I didn't mention having has been in a CEO role
Right.
before. So I'll mention that, but also simultaneously pointing out that there is a degree of confidence that's also required. Sometimes things are born out of necessity. Other times it's more so that you know yourself, you know what you're looking for. But there's a degree of confidence that's required to transition, allow yourself to transition as needed for where you are in life. How would you say that confidence factored into your career pathway?
So I'm incredibly humbled to hear your interpretation of my my path, because I never really saw it that way. And so when it came to confidence, I think a lot of, well, it may sound funny, but I think there was a lot of blind confidence right out of out of college. It was probably an age thing too. I thought I was fantastic. I knew a whole lot, and I was ready to go out there and just make my mark and climb that ladder. I was
Mm-hmm,
I was ready to go. And I think if it wasn't for that blind confidence, that fearlessness, that a little bit of the naivety, I would not have jumped to go to another country right out of college and be bold enough to ask for a position in a company that I might not have had any business having right off the bat. And but then again, in turn, the general manager looked at me and said, "Well, he had enough confidence in maybe my, eh, the enthusiasm,
mm-hmm,
to say, all
mm-hmm.
right, let's just give it a try." And I learned, I was really thrown into the deep end right away. And I think that when you jump and you're just trying to survive, you're treading that water and learning so much so fast. I think that may have prepared that would have built a little bit of that confidence to say, well, not that it can't get any worse, but it couldn't get any scarier, you
Right,
know?
right.
And and so, well, let's just try. And each time as I move through the different opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
I made it a point, I think, and I think maybe this would answer the question, where confidence came in. It wasn't so the piece of the confidence that connected it was the fact that each time I took on a role, I did my very best to think about what is it that I liked in it, what is it that I didn't like, what fit and what didn't fit.
Yeah.
And so as I moved to the next opportunity, it wasn't because this one wasn't working. It was because that one presented itself was like, okay, that's a better fit. Oh, that's a better fit. And I think that's probably what led to where I am now, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I love the story. And in what you described at the beginning, a lot of times when I'm talking about confidence, and specifically confidence in women in the workplace, I'm referring to it as rebuilding. Because what you described, this belief in yourself, you said like a blind confidence, where you're not overthinking. You do. I want to do it, I'm going to do it. I want to try it, I'm going to try it. and then you're layering on your experience, and that's what's driving your decision, is where a lot of us start, a lot of us begin. So how you then continue to feel depends on what is reinforced in the environments around you. And that can start to affect how you behave, not because your ability has gone away. And you touched on time, no, like an age thing. You said maybe it's an age thing too. I think age is a factor in the sense that it's the exposures, what you get exposed to over time. And some of the information does feed more of the fear than that drive to go forward. And then it starts to change a little bit. That also brings the question, what is confidence? How do you define confidence?
So here's the, as I'm recapping what I just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
the blind confidence and age, the youth, there is, I think that does combine pretty well in the positions I put myself. But my confidence has changed, obviously, well, hopefully, and matured, through the years. So the same confidence I had then is very different than the mature confidence I have now. But if I were to define confidence across the timeline, it's trust. Confidence is trust.
Yeah.
And the trust will change depending on what the subject is. So for example, if I go to a swing set, the confidence I have is I trust that I'm relying on the strength of those chains to keep me up if I decide to get on that swing.
Yes.
And why I thought a swing, I don't know. Apparently I'm park. But then on the other side, when we're talking about relationships, right? The trust I have in my colleagues is the trust that I can rely on their support, on their knowledge, on their authenticity when they deal with me, their professionalism. So I'm trusting that I can rely on that. That's the confidence that translates into confidence, right? Or that's what I define it as. And that goes across with, your personal relationships, whether it's parents, siblings, a partner, and the confidence you have in them is also, that you can rely, you trust that you can rely on their care, their love,
Yep.
their support. But then when it comes to self-confidence, it's like, okay, well, how does that, what does trust mean? Well, it's not that I trust myself to make the right decisions. For me, the self-confidence is the trust that I can rely now on my experiences. It's the fact that this isn't gonna, kill me. Let's just go and do. I can trust the knowledge that I've gained, but more so, I can trust, for me, I trust in my faith, because what has given me the trust, what I define as trust in a mature way, is developing also the spirituality side of who I am and my relationship with God.
I love this breakdown. When I'm doing the confidence talk, I always refer to the Merriam-Webster definition of confidence, which is it has that component of self and the environment. Having a consciousness, a feeling and consciousness of one's own power or of ability to rely on your environment. And so when you talk about relationships, part of what gives you the confidence, or the swing set, going in, I'm looking based on what I'm seeing. I think I can swing. I have the ability to, but is it swinging when I sit on that thing? And it's more of, okay, great. The chains look good and they're doing exactly what they look like. They're holding now I can enjoy my swing. Now I can enjoy my swinging environment. So the swinging experience rather. So there's me and this be able to move my legs as needed to do what is important. And also there's the swing. Are these chains going to hold up? And then on the self-confidence, this is the stuff that is inside of you. Again, I love this breakdown that you've done where it's the knowing yourself. I'm layering on experience. Now I can face this situation, not so much with blind confidence, but it's more of now I have experience to back me up. there's less that feels unknown about this, and I'm sure I'll be okay on the other end of it.
Right.
And then what you're describing, the faith component, part of that surety coming from, I believe that God is going to take care of me,
Mm-hmm.
which I often refer to as the faith advantage, because you,
Oh, I love that.
you accept the components that are, there's what I can do, but it's not, they're just things that are beyond my control, but that's okay. I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
God has got me. And we also touched on how that ties into the work that you're doing now, that empowered purpose has a faith aspect, and you lead with that when you're interacting with people too.
I do.
How does that show up in the work that you do?
So when we first meet, and when I first meet with a client, what we're going to talk about is when we're really talking about true optimization, you can't be you can't be at optimal levels unless you're really understanding that all parts of you have to work together, right? And in all the parts, we look at the four areas: your emotional self, your physical self, your spiritual self, and your relational self. And so right off the bat, we're looking at how are these components going to reflect your progress? How is that going to fill that whole space when we're optimizing your brain? So spirituality is one of the four, and it's a very key component. There was one of my favorite things is, instinctively, I always knew there was a reason why spirituality had a component in peace, self-peace. There was something beyond that, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew instinctively that's through clients that was happening. And then recently there was a study done, and I've got to go get all the details again. I only read it and I kind of put it off to the side, and I lost that article. I need to go get it again. But the neuroscience labs came and identified that there is a spot in your brain that contributes to spirituality. And I was like, yes, that's it. Because if I'm working on that full optimization of your brain and we don't develop the spirituality piece of that, you're not going to be at optimal level. So that's a big, now spirituality is very different, obviously, than religion. So my company is a Christian-based company. However, not all my clients are.
Right.
But that really doesn't have a bearing on what we talk about. It's really your connection spiritually, having that be a whole piece, as is your emotional self, your physical self, and your relational self.
I'm interested in that article as well. One of the patterns that I realized, you make the distinction between spirituality and religion, but time and time again, man has come to the conclusion that there's something else, that there's something beyond. Just across cultures, across the ages, you'll see that pattern coming up consistently. And I love that you touched on that, in so much as you're Christian-based, that the work resonates with everyone. And it's not as though being Christian-based means that your clients are only Christian. Your non-Christian clients, and basically it's open to everyone, and people find benefit in recognizing those different parts. You're teasing out the spiritual component among the other aspects of working all the parts together.
Right.
Now, in talking about a diverse career, diverse experience, touching so many different people in so many different ways, and how confidence has matured.
Yes.
I come to the question about confidence boosts, and perhaps if you would indulge, kind of along the same lines of how you painted a path of maturity, you might have different boosts for those different phases. So when you have needed confidence boosts, what have you done for your boosts or your reminders?
At the different stages?
at the different stages. You can speak of it generally, but I'm curious about the different stages because of that distinction you made. It was quite an insightful distinction there, talking about the confidence as it was younger, earlier in your career, earlier in life, and then that more mature confidence that's sort of like an informed confidence.
That's a really great question. Okay, so boy, I gotta go back. And coincidentally, I last night I had a conversation with a friend from college that I hadn't spoken to many years. And it was we laughed because it was an instant. I mean, his voice came over the phone and it was like, I know that voice.
Oh,
And
wow, that's
you know,
nice.
it was very it took me back. And so it's so funny now that time frame is fresh in my mind actually. So that that blind confidence, wow. So in college, I think I had this picture of who I wanted to be.
Hmm.
And I know I was raised with the thought that yes, you can do anything you want with hard work. Yes, you can be whatever you want to be. And I heard that a lot. But I saw it. I saw my parents model that. And so I'm like, huh. And so I had this picture of who I wanted to be. So whether it was, obviously it wasn't a full maturity, but it helped me stay on a path,
Hmm.
you know. And so I remember in the very beginning, the confidence boost I needed, because this was before cell phones, this was before, FaceTime chat, any of that stuff. That, I mean, we did have email, so that was good. But I remember I was down in Guadalajara, Mexico, and I was young. I was 23, 24, and the board, I was at a board meeting, and I felt like I was getting smacked around. I was getting pushed up against the wall, and I couldn't come up. And this was, like I said earlier, it's kind of like a trial by fire. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I remember I went back to my office. Well, first I shut the door and I cried.
Of course.
I was like, what am I doing?
Natural
And then,
reaction, yes.
right. And then I emailed my mom and I I took her response, printed
Mhm.
it out, and I had it on my computer for at least 10, 15 years after. At least.
Wow.
Um, and basically she said, what's your problem? She said, you're playing a game in business. It's like chess. She says, no lives are at stake. People win, people lose. It's just about what your next move is. And basically, she told me to, suck it up because I said, I want to quit. And she's like, you're not quitting. And, and I, so, and she responded. And so I'm reading this email. I'm like,
Yeah.
and it was always back in that time, a lot of it was my mom. I went back and I was like,
Beautiful.
Mom, what am I going to do? And she would, one of the, what are you going to do? You know what to do. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what to do. So, I think that that was the beginning part of the confidence. I would go to my mom and she'd just kind of turn it back, turn it back on me, turn that mirror and go, what are you going to do? You decide. And so then I started to learn, all right, I'm going to make a decision. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll learn from it. And then the next part, and then children. That changed my confidence too. And that piece it translated into work because as a new mom, I had baby twins, and everywhere, because there's two of them and they're very different. I was kind of managing their development,
Mhm.
right? And I knew that if I didn't stick up for them, if I didn't speak up for them, if I wasn't the one advocating for my children, nobody else was going to.
Yeah.
And that gave me another sense of confidence. So at work, when I was working during that time, I thought of, and again, it's amazing how it's parallel, right? Because during that time, I was working with the adult education.
Okay.
And at that time, I remember thinking, I was a mom, and even though these were adults, it was kind of my role to teach. And so my confidence came every day from my children, in a sense, that I when I needed that, like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Am I still, am I doing the right thing? Am I teaching the right thing? However it was, I thought, all I know is that you deserve my best self.
Mm.
And that's where I would pull from.
Yeah.
It was my desire to make sure that if I want my kids' teachers to give them their best, I've got to do the same thing for these, even though they were adults, right? That was where that came from. I've always had my faith as part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, it really wasn't until about 8 to 10 years ago, that there was a different depth to my faith. So I started spiritual direction about eight years ago, maybe longer. And I went into outside of who I was. I started seeing the world from God's perspective, not mine. When the ego starts to go away and you replace it with the humility, the question, truly the curiosity of others, you know that your place in the world isn't, I know you mentioned fear earlier, and sometimes when we lack confidence, or when I lacked confidence, I was worried. It came from, fear. What are people going to think about what I say? Am I going to look silly, dumb? All of those worries. Well, when your confidence shifts into a sense of maturity, when your faith kind of comes into it, look, I know that it's not about, I know what I know. Here's my knowledge, but here's the gift that I have. And so when I need a confidence boost, I do two things. First and foremost, I do go to prayer, because my only concern is that, like, for example, today, I've never done a podcast before. I was very excited. I was nervous. I'm like, what's this going to look like? What's it going to feel like? It's going to be recorded. Oh my gosh, it's now printed forever. And so those things came into my mind. But then I realized, it's like, you know what? Just the same way that not everybody's going to like you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Your job is not to make everybody like you. Well, the same thing. The words coming out of my mouth are not meant for everybody.
Right.
So my boost of confidence when I go to prayers is, you know what, Lord, you gave me whatever gifts in particular to just me. So the words that I'm going to deliver are unique to me, and they're only going to reach the people who need to hear them. And that's the confidence I have from that piece. Now, the human experiences that I do have my people. I have my people. And, if things are happening, I have my siblings. Actually, they're a hoot. These two, they make me laugh. So when certain things happen, I know who to go to. Yeah, I'm like, So I reach out to them. I know I'm going to get something I need from them. Yeah. I have my friends, and I have a very select group of friends that I know that when I need a confidence boost, they're going to give it to me authentically. Because you can tell if someone's just going to say, oh, you're fabulous, you're fantastic, you got this. It's like, oh, that's great. But it doesn't last, It doesn't last. But I do know that when I need to reach out and I'm feeling a little hesitant, I know that I have a select group of friends that I reach out, and they reach out to me in return, and we break down where the fear is coming from, and they remind me of why. They remind me of why I'm doing it. Why did you decide to do that podcast? Why did you decide to do that project? And when you have those beautiful reminders, and you know that you're doing it authentically, that changes.
It's absolutely beautiful. I love everything that you've said, which, by the way, when I said it would be great to have this conversation, I knew it was not going to be a short one.
Mm.
Okay, so now let's break down the breakdown that you've just done. It's beautiful. You said
Oh,
for now,
geez.
it's my prayer and my people.
Yep.
I love it so much. When I talk about rebuilding confidence, the last part is refresh and refuel. I talk about going to your village, like going back home in a manner of speaking. The siblings, such a gift. Such a gift.
They
My
are.
sister texted me right now. When we get off, I'm going to see what she texted. But it's like the kind of
Yeah.
laughter you get with siblings is just in its own category.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like eye contact and laughter just for no reason. One of the things you talked about was it's not just the words, it's who it's coming from, because that's what makes it resonant. The vessel, the messenger absolutely matters, because yes, someone can say, oh my gosh, you've got this. But the one who knows you, who knows where you're coming from, who has seen, who understands it in that context, says it in a different way, and it resonates in a different way. And
Yes.
as you described it, it's really a reminder. It's in there, but maybe it was getting a little bit buried. There was so much going on. And then here comes your reminder. You're like, dust it off, clear the way, and then you see it again. That's often all you need.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back to the beginning, I love that story of the printed out email. First of all, how state of the art of you to email your mom.
Yeah.
And that way you had a record of it.
Yeah.
And that reaction, that's a reflection. Yes, you've got this. And again, the vessel, you know that she knows and she believes, and she has the credibility with you to be able to deliver that message. And it's that image, that reminder, it's a powerful visual of what's that voice that you have. And then he touched on motherhood, another powerful influence, because it kicked in that protective component that pushes down whatever fear. It changes your priority and brought out in you the thing that makes so many leaders successful. And you said, I'm bringing my best here to you. And once you've decided that, everyone that encounters you benefits from it. Your clients, in your case, the students, your family, your employees, you've decided best self. And it's such a gift to the people around you. Now you're holding yourself to it. It's not like they've done anything to earn it. It's your decision. And it keeps you grounded. It keeps you focused. It's more of, here's my why, and here's how I've decided to do it. And then faith, touching on the faith component. I did want to ask you about, you said 8-10 years ago.
Spiritual direction?
Direction. Yes, spiritual direction. What is spiritual direction?
Spiritual direction is it's a little bit like therapy, but so you have a spiritual director, and they help guide you to a deeper relationship with God.
I have never heard that, Diana.
It's I can't tell you the blessings that have come from that, because it's, for somebody who's seeking, anybody, when you're seeking and there's something that's just, you try to fill a hole, right? You try to fill a hole, and you try to fill it with all these things, and there's no satisfaction. And you're like, okay, maybe, people talk about God, and all right, I got a Bible here. They open it up, and it's the Word of God is a beautiful thing, but it can be boxed with two reasons. One is that you're limited to understanding the Bible as to your own knowledge, right? Or your own understanding. That's one. The second piece is the experiential piece, right? And so when you have somebody that can guide you and say, and ask you the questions, all of a sudden you're like, what? Is that why I feel this? And then you learn to interpret your the spiritual experiences around. And the very first was, maybe it was the first month, definitely first, second month of spiritual direction ever. I remember he said to me, and it stuck forever. He said, "We are not human beings having spiritual experiences." He said, "We are spiritual beings having human experiences."
Oh, that's good.
So that is
a good one.
right? So that is spiritual direction. When you have someone, a spiritual director that helps guide your deepening of your relationship with God.
I'm so glad I asked.
Glad
I've learned something
you
else.
asked too.
That's awesome. So summarizing the boost for the different phases,
Let's see.
there's a common component of your people, you know, starting with your mom. And as an aside, being in a boardroom at the age of 23 and 24 is by itself quite impressive. That's very telling that you were there at that point in your career, already fierce. So there's the my people component. There's the reminder and your motivation when you talk about why you're bringing, now you decided to bring your best self and being protective and guiding others. And still today, the people component represented in siblings and friends who know and love you and serve as a reminder and prayer.
And I have to say, I would be remiss to not mention that, you know, when we're talking, you know, our brain and the endorphins and the dopamine rush and all the buzzwords that are happening. Yes, there is something very real to, you know, as you were talking about in the very, well, our conversation shifted a little bit for me too, because in the beginning I was like, oh, if I can have you say this every time I enter a room, talk about, overflowing confidence. I was like, well, wow. But then we moved over, and just a little bit ago, as you were talking, I felt your authentic self. You affected me because I knew how much that you brought your best self in the work that you did to prepare to have me as your guest. And I feel the way it affected me is that I feel completely, utterly honored that you spent that time getting to know me, to ask me questions that mattered to me in my life. And I thank you so much.
Thank you. It is absolutely my pleasure. Bring best self to the work you do is absolutely a personal belief of mine. And I tell my teams that when we're in a good place, we have to be at the place where people can hear it.
Yes.
And now we can do anything together. You're doing your best for the people we're responsible for. We're okay. We can do anything. But thank you for taking the time to say that. And it's always a delight. And I would be happy to come in and introduce you anytime. Anytime. It's just lovely. I love the way that it's translated to what you're doing now, to hear the story told. And of course you lived it. It was much, much longer in real life than it looks on paper, but such a rich experience. You could have done anything with this rich background. And yet I also see how it just nicely points to what you do now. But it also lends itself to the next question, which is, what was your sign to make the move from corporate work, those more, structured work settings, to entrepreneurship? What was your sign, and what gave you the confidence to move forward with it?
So again, multiple, right? So one is the what I needed for my family, for my boys. They were heading into high school, and they were my priority, and I needed a flexibility for them. That was always in the back of my mind. I worked for a company. So I worked at the time, I was at Paula Casino, loved being there. I had a great time, great colleagues, worked for great people. And my former boss, who is now passed, thank you. She fought for me, and I very much appreciated it. And I learned so much from her. I was working as a trainer at the time and in training and development, and the conversations I had with uh, with some of my executives and trying to get them to that next level. Um, Part of that was I knew that there was more. I knew there was another piece that I could give, and part of that was, the four elements. But because I was in a structured, big organization, there was, I was tied by those boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought there's just more. There's more to this, and then I found, I had stumbled because of my family, a family member into neurofeedback. I saw how much more we could do when I could optimize. I kept thinking about my executives. I'm like, I can optimize your brain and do this, and because you were saying, there are certain things that unless you're ready to hear it, you can't. Well, I can train you on, organization all day long, stress management, time management. But if your brain is riddled with anxiety and stress, you're not going to be able to apply those.
Mm-mm.
So that was what, as it was developing into that, and I knew there wasn't a place for me in that, in that culture because they had different goals. I thought, and actually it was a challenge, not a challenge, but I would say to some of my team members there, it's like, if you are not happy with what you're doing, it is in your power to make a move. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, easy for you to say. And I'm like, it's not easy for me to say, and I'm going to do it. So I'm like, I'll go do it.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. And I did, and I created the flexibility I needed to, and it's not without hard work, that's for sure, and a little bit of stress, but a whole lot of faith. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, yes, it did. Picking up from the point about your how in being true to yourself, it points you to the right thing and in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge accepted, yes, chuckle, but what I gathered from how you described that was essentially you were taking the advice that you had given someone. You don't like something here, this isn't working for you, change it, which was something that you have done all along in your career. So it's almost like you indirectly advised yourself and did what was the right thing for you.
Right.
Moving into empowered purpose. Yes, entrepreneurship comes with its challenges and you learn and grow in a different way. And it also gave you the flexibility that you wanted. And then the breadth to do with all of your experience, what was the right thing to do and to make it yours. So that's the gift that you get, along with the challenges, no doubt. But so much positive comes from it. So in itself, really, although I always end with this question, in itself, really a bold move, a big move, and sort of a culminating move. It's all of the things you've done and it's manifest in empowered purpose. I'll ask the question nonetheless. What's your next bold move?
I think my next bold move is I've got to make a decision as to, am I going to stay with where I am now? Am I going to jump back into an education for me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a question I've been wrestling with for 5 years. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a spiritual director. I'm a provider. And I guide people through their development professionally.
Mm-hmm.
And although all that is wonderful, and my clients will say, because I've done little surveys here and there, my clients will say, no, you don't need to go, you don't need to get your PhD, you don't need to do these things. And although I appreciate very much their confidence in me,
Mm-hmm.
and our relationships, my relationships with my clients, that I still believe in being a lifelong learner. So does that mean I'm going to go and just continue to learn, get certificates here and there because I enjoy the learning piece? Or am I going to do something to become a clinician, to actually have another degree, attached to my name?
Yeah.
So that's going to be, so my next bold move is going to be, where am I going to go in that direction? And then stick with it.
And when we're on the other side of it, because now I know you, that means I'll be knowing you from this point forward, we'll be
Yes.
able to see the pattern where in your
Oh,
very Diana Aldrete way, you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
identify, it's like as soon as you know, okay,
yeah,
this is the thing,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you'll do the thing.
yeah,
You'll
yeah.
identify what is that education, where is that education coming from,
Right,
and then
right.
move forward.
Yes.
Whatever that next move is,
Hmm.
I'm excited to be here to know you at this phase, and I'm looking forward to hearing what it will
Yeah.
be and seeing what that next phase is, because whatever it is, I know it's going to be another beautiful piece to this amazing life story that you have.
Oh, I love how you say that. And thank you so much for your support. It's wonderful to have, you know, people who take an interest in you as a person. And I appreciate that.
It is an absolute delight. It's been an absolute pleasure to have met you, to have had the opportunity to talk. And now I get to claim being the first podcast that you've done.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, you do. And I am so glad I did it with you. It just from the moment you crossed right in front of me and stopped that day, I was like, this is a beautiful woman. Like, I've got to know this person.
And we did. We made it happen. It was
Yeah,
lovely to meet you then, lovely to be in touch.
likewise.
And now, because of this connection, I'm starting to see the work that you do. And I'm sure even then there's more to learn. So that's part of my plan too. It's getting to know more, learn more, understand more. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for this rich conversation that really encompassed so much that I couldn't have anticipated and that I've ended up learning from. And we've fought through some significant technical difficulties today. So you
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
will know how much of a miracle it is to have one conversation come
yeah.
together from this. But it has
That's
been
very true.
it's been a delight. Thank you so much, Diana.
You know what? It really is my pleasure. I it's such a gift to have heard, your interpretations of the things I say, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana.